a group of women were forced to be sold to the American continent, and what awaited them were old bachelors who had never seen women before. The moment they stepped off the ship, all the men showed greedy looks in their eyes. Among these women was Alice, who was bought by a man named Henry, but since they had never seen each other before, Alice thought the man waving at her was Henry. Seeing that the man looked kind, Alice finally relaxed her worried heart. However, upon first contact, she learned he was Henry's younger brother, and Alice couldn't help but feel nervous again. On the way back, the younger brother introduced the local situation. Since this was a newly established town after immigrating to America, everyone except the officials was poor. Now, among the three brothers, only the eldest, Henry, had bought Alice, while the other two were still bachelors. Even so, they had incurred a huge debt. Before coming here, Alice had prepared herself mentally, but hearing the younger brother's words, she realized that surviving here wasn't easy. After arriving home, Alice happily had a meal with the two brothers. Suddenly, the eldest brother, Henry, walked in. Hearing the younger brother introduce her as Alice, he only took a brief look at her, making Alice think he disliked her. But Henry said, "Get married in 7 days." Such a stiff statement made even the younger brother feel the tense atmosphere, not to mention Alice's feelings. That night, she went out for a walk, but when she came to the river, Henry suddenly appeared behind her, scaring Alice. Without saying a word, Henry started to act. She tried to resist desperately, but how could a woman match a man's strength? Alice could only endure in silence. The next day, the town's governor announced a decree. The first batch of immigrants would receive 100 acres of land for free. This was incredibly good news for Henry's family. In this way, they would be able to pay off their debts. But Alice couldn't be happy. She told Verity, who was also sold here, about what had happened the previous night. Seeing her friend wronged, Verity's fiery temper couldn't stand it. Although Henry knew he had gone too far, he didn't take the matter to heart. Alice followed Henry and his two brothers to see the newly acquired land. Just as they were envisioning a better future, two debt collectors suddenly showed up. It turned out that the money Henry used to buy Alice was borrowed from them, and now seeing such fertile land, they naturally wanted it. But the land was hard-won, so how could Henry's brothers give it up easily? To make money quickly and pay off the debt, Henry decided to take his younger brother to the Indians' territory. The younger brother knew this journey was dangerous, so he hoped Alice would take care of the third brother, Silas. In fact, when Silas picked up Alice that day, he had fallen in love with her, but he couldn't reveal his feelings because of his brother. Alice also had a good impression of him, and what happened that night had become a knot in her heart. She hoped Silas could persuade Henry to give up marrying her. Although Silas wanted to do so, he knew how could Henry easily give up Alice after spending so much money. Therefore, this matter could only be discussed when they returned. Soon, the two brothers rode towards the Indian tribe. On the way, Silas was preoccupied, wondering how to talk to his eldest brother about the matter. Henry had taken on a huge debt to buy Alice. Although they had a relationship before marriage, it didn't mean he would let Alice go. Silas begged his eldest brother to let them be, but Henry refused to give them a chance to be together, no matter what. This made Silas so angry that he attacked his brother, but he was no match for Henry. For a woman, the two brothers had their first estrangement. During the break, Henry slept on the boat filled with gunpowder, while Silas stayed on the shore. But at night, an accident occurred. It turned out that Henry, who loved smoking, accidentally ignited the boat. He shouted for help to his brother, but Silas stood motionless, watching Henry blown into the water by the gunpowder. After returning, he told the town's authorities about his brother's death. Everyone sympathized with the brother's experience, except a blacksmith named James, who raised doubts, because he knew Silas liked Alice, and if Henry hadn't died, Silas would hardly have had a chance. James' words made Silas feel guilty, and Alice, who didn't know the truth, stopped James from asking further. That night, Silas stayed outside alone, feeling guilty, while Alice, who had finally escaped Henry's clutches, walked out happily. When she was first sold here, Henry had a relationship with her without her permission. Now that the person who had hurt her was finally dead, although Alice appeared grief-stricken, she was overjoyed inside, and Silas got what he wanted, finally winning Alice. But neither of them knew that Henry, who had fallen into the river, wasn't dead. Although he was seriously injured, he was saved by several Indians. As days passed, Silas and Alice were building their love nest, envisioning a beautiful future together. But one day, James suddenly stopped Alice and said that since Henry was dead, he now had the chance to marry her. but Alice only had Silas in her heart and definitely wouldn't agree to James' request. Alice thought this would make him give up. But one day, her friend Verity made an inappropriate remark, which was overheard by an official. Soon, the matter was brought to the town's court. Because Verity had publicly humiliated her husband, the officials decided to sentence her to a day of public exposure. But just then, James stood up and said that since Henry was dead, he demanded to marry Alice. The officials considered that although Henry had borrowed money from them to buy Alice, if someone could repay the debt, they could take Alice home. Seizing the opportunity, James quickly offered his belongings, and now the court began to consider whether to hand Alice over to James. Before this matter was resolved, Verity was locked in the square. Because she insulted the officials again, she was splashed with dirty water. Thus, in pain and unwillingness, Verity endured until midnight with her alcoholic husband by her side. Here, women had no right to autonomy, only being treated as trading goods, not to mention freedom of speech. But the moment Verity was released, she publicly cursed the officials, and this word was heard by the priest. The next day, Silas found James, hoping he would let Alice go to him, but James had long suspected Henry, guessing that Silas must have killed his brother Henry to be with Alice. These words completely angered Silas, and for the woman Alice, the two friends who had known each other for years fought. Fortunately, the governor happened to pass by and stop them from fighting further. Just then, a strange thing happened in the town. It turned out that the official cursed by Verity fell ill without any warning. The doctor tried all methods but couldn't find the cause, and the priest began to suspect Verity's curse. The next day, he went to the governor, hoping to investigate whether Verity was a witch. After obtaining the right to investigate, the priest quickly had Verity brought in, now suspecting she was a witch. Although her husband explained beside her, it couldn't clear her suspicion, so Verity didn't need to prove anything because she didn't have the ability to make someone sick, whether the priest believed it or not. Verity no longer explained. On the other side, James, to win Alice, even carefully made a bell as a gift for her, but Alice didn't like him at all. Although he had saved her from a wolf pack a few days ago, it didn't mean she could marry him. Helpless, James had to say that Henry's death wasn't an accident. It was likely Silas who did it. This matter made Alice unable to believe it. Although she had wanted to escape Henry's clutches, she wouldn't have let Silas kill his brother. After returning, she asked about the details of the incident. Silas didn't hide it. Although he hadn't killed his brother, he had after all not saved him. Watching his brother die with his own eyes, he felt guilty. The priest wanted women to take off their clothes for inspection, but the husband beside her not only didn't stop it but was even excited. It turned out that the town official had a strange disease, and the priest suspected the woman Verity had cast a curse. To find out if she was a witch, the priest wanted to see if she had the mark of the devil. But how could Verity agree to such a rude request? Although she had held a grudge against the official for punishing her that day, as an ordinary person, she had no ability to make someone sick. Now, since she couldn't produce evidence to prove she wasn't a witch, the entire town's residents avoided her, and even her husband's tavern suffered poor business. Alice saw her friend in such a predicament but couldn't help. But Verity didn't care and even joked to scare a passerby, proving she had no witchcraft ability. Unexpectedly, that night, the passerby died mysteriously, which made everyone suspect even more that she was a witch. The next day, the priest took people to the tavern, wanting to find a witch's exclusive item, a feather and a certain animal's blood. Her husband hoped she would take off her clothes in front of the priest to clarify she wasn't a witch, but Verity couldn't agree because she really had a mark on her body. However, it was just a birthmark. If the priest saw it, he would definitely make a big issue out of it. Then, black would be called white, and Verity would surely be hanged. To protect his wife, the alcoholic husband assured the priest she wasn't a witch, which made the priest temporarily give up the search. On the other side, Alice found Jocelyn, who was sold here with her, because she heard Jocelyn had poisoned someone to death, so she guessed the official's illness might be related to her. Jocelyn didn't hide it. She had indeed put poison in the official's glove, because Alice had helped her on the ship. Jocelyn didn't want the officials to sell Alice to James. Moreover, Verity had been locked in the square that day, which made Jocelyn feel that women had no human rights here. Therefore, she wanted to join hands with Alice to deal with these men. Alice was moved by her plan, and to survive freely here, she agreed to cooperate with Jocelyn. At this time, the town doctor found much sewage beside the well where everyone got water. He suspected those with the strange disease must be related to this. To confirm his guess, the doctor brought medicine to the official. but the priest still favored the witch's curse and refused to let the official take the medicine. The doctor certainly didn't believe such superstitious claims. However, if the official was willing to gamble with his life, he could refuse to drink the medicine. After the doctor left, the official looked at the medicine on the table and for the first time doubted his beliefs. The next day, during a church gathering, Verity, led by her husband, entered the church for the first time. She wanted to show she wasn't a witch but a believer, but the priest still pressed her, hinting to everyone that she was a witch. Verity's fiery temper couldn't take it anymore, and she began to accuse everyone present. The priest seized the opportunity to ask her to take off her clothes in public. Only if there was no mark on her body could she prove her innocence. But how could Verity display herself in public? The priest thought her escape meant she admitted it. But suddenly, Jocelyn returned with Verity, promising the governor she could clarify the matter. Then she began to flatter the priest, hoping he would give her a blessing. Just as the priest was about to give his blessing, Jocelyn asked him to bless the bread in her hand. Although the priest was confused, he did as told. He didn't know he had fallen into Jocelyn's trap, because if Verity ate the blessed bread and nothing happened, it would prove she wasn't a witch, and the used priest had to feed it to her himself. Thus, the reluctant priest could only do so in front of so many people. Although he knew it was a trick to deceive people, he didn't dare to expose Jocelyn's plot. Seeing Verity leave as if nothing had happened, everyone no longer believed she was a witch. The official who recovered after taking the medicine also no longer believed the priest's lies. Seeing the truth come to light, the governor led people to throw an antidote into the well, finally solving the problem that had troubled everyone. Later, Jocelyn found the governor, hoping to buy Alice in her husband's name so that Alice could gain freedom and marry Silas as she wished. It had to be said that Alice had made two very good friends. That night, Verity's alcoholic husband went out to relieve himself, and a figure ran past him. When Verity went out to look for him, several Indians suddenly appeared in the town. One of them stared closely at Verity, while the others surrounded her husband. However, these Indians didn't harm them, they just pushed the drunkard and left. Only the Indians staring at Verity remained motionless. When the town's residents appeared, they instantly captured him, but his eyes never left Verity. Although taken as a captive back to the town, whenever he saw a woman, this Indian would stare fixedly. The next day, during the interrogation, the officials found that the Indian's musket was made in this town. Remembering that a wealthy merchant's musket was stolen 6 weeks ago, there must be a traitor in the town. They wanted to get information from the Indian, but no one here spoke Indian. Helpless, they could only go to Silas, for he was the only one in the town who knew Indian. Before the officials could send for Silas, the wealthy merchant arrived first, because his brother had died outside, and now Silas had 200 acres of land given by the governor. The wealthy merchant knew Silas couldn't manage it alone, so he wanted Silas to give up 50 acres. From being a farmhand to owning land now, how could Silas bear to give it to him? But the wealthy merchant threatened that if he didn't agree, he would see. Silas ignored him and went to the officials as an interpreter. It turned out that after the Indians got the muskets, they had no gunpowder, so they came to the town to steal it. In one official's eyes, he had always looked down on these natives, so he wanted to cut off the Indian's hands to scare him, but the Indian wasn't afraid at all, for he knew these people didn't dare to hurt him. Just as the execution was about to happen, the governor hurriedly stopped it. Then he asked who had the muskets. The wealthy merchant suddenly walked over, saying he knew who had stolen his musket. Then looked at Silas, because only Silas could communicate with the Indians here. He was the prime suspect. In court, although there was no evidence to prove Silas guilty, he couldn't prove his innocence either, because at that time his brother Henry had taken him out, and the boat was loaded with a lot of gunpowder, and Henry had also died in a gunpowder explosion by accident. Although Silas tried to explain he didn't know what goods his brother had brought, who would believe his words? Now all evidence pointed to the brothers, so the officials had to lock Silas up first. At this time, Alice looked at James, and from her expression, it seemed she knew something. To rescue Silas, she found James, hoping he would tell the hidden truth he knew. But how could James say it? For he also liked Alice. Now, it was the perfect opportunity to throw stones at Silas while he was down. Helpless, Alice went to the prison, hoping to learn some truth from Silas. Otherwise, she didn't know how to help him. But although Silas knew the wealthy merchant had deliberately framed him, he had no way to prove his innocence. He wanted to give part of the land to the wealthy merchant, perhaps so he could be released. But Alice didn't want him to compromise. Desperate, she went to find James again, but facing the powerful wealthy merchant, James didn't want to oppose such a person. Seeing that soft tactics didn't work, Alice immediately used provocation, saying that although he was an upright man, his timid character made even her, a woman with no strength, look down on him. Sure enough, this method worked. That night, James secretly came to Alice and told her all the secrets he knew. It turned out that the wealthy merchant had a small hoodlum under him who idled around all day. Just after the wealthy merchant's musket was stolen, this hoodlum suddenly disappeared, so the wealthy merchant suspected he had stolen the musket. When they found the hoodlum, the ruthless wealthy merchant not only killed him but also secretly buried the body. The town officials didn't know about this. Otherwise, the wealthy merchant would have been sentenced to the gallows for murder. Alice's women dug many big pits at the boundary of her farmland. The wealthy merchant hurriedly asked what she was looking for. Alice pointed to the ground and said she was looking for a hidden corpse, and this corpse was the slave the wealthy merchant had secretly killed not long ago. If this matter was exposed by Alice, the wealthy merchant would definitely be sentenced to the gallows by the judge. Seeing the matter getting more and more serious, James quickly ran over to stop Alice, for he knew the consequences of offending the wealthy merchant. But to rescue her beloved man, Silas, Alice didn't care about anything now. The wealthy merchant also saw that this woman was determined to fight him. To quickly quell the matter, the wealthy merchant found Silas, who had been wrongfully imprisoned. If Silas could stop Alice from continuing to dig, he would withdraw all previous charges. At this time, Alice, who didn't know the situation, was still looking for the body. When she stood up, she found Silas had been released. Her persistence had finally paid off. Silas was very grateful to have such a loving woman as Alice. Afterwards, they thanked James again. In fact, Silas's smooth release was all due to the information provided by James and Alice. But seeing the couple reunited, James felt an indescribable pain in his heart, for he still loved Alice deeply. Just when they thought they could live a peaceful life, another strange thing happened in the town. In the middle of the night, the doctor suddenly found a figure digging a grave, and the person ran away as soon as he saw the doctor. The next day, the town's residents and officials came to the graveyard to check. It turned out that the grave was of the previous governor. A gold mine treasure map had been circulating in the town, and the previous governor's grave being dug up was likely related to this. Originally thought to be just a rumor, now everyone began to believe in the treasure map's existence. Suddenly, everyone in the town began to scheme. Jocelyn thought the treasure map might be with the two officials, while the two officials thought it was with their brother. Only the wealthy merchant thought searching for a gold mine was too unrealistic, not as practical as making money from the land. As for Silas and Alice, they just wanted to farm their land well and didn't care about the gold mine secret at all. And the younger brother hoped they would get married soon so life could settle down. Silas heeded his younger brother's advice and soon married Alice. Jocelyn gave them a cow as a wedding gift, while James looked a bit lonely beside them. On the other side, after being saved by the Indians, Henry had been recuperating there. A fellow townsman who was also stranded there soon discovered Henry's secret. He was sure that although the gunpowder explosion was an accident, Henry had come upstream for the gold mine, because the previous governor had died on a voyage, and Henry had been on that ship at the time. He suspected Henry had the treasure map, and this fellow townsman didn't return to the town, deliberately hiding in the Indian tribe. Henry, in turn, suspected he had the treasure map. Thus, the two men, each with ulterior motives, suspected the other of wanting to monopolize the gold mine. For this reason, Henry took the opportunity to sneak into his fellow townsman's tent to search when the latter went out. Although he didn't find the treasure map, he discovered many gems, but he didn't expect to be seen by an Indian woman when he went out. When the fellow townsman returned, he immediately came to trouble Henry. The two soon started fighting. Worried about being punished by the Indians, Henry quickly found an opportunity to escape. As it was getting dark, Henry found a small boat. When he tried to steal it, the fellow townsman suddenly appeared behind him. He didn't bother Henry because he had gone to his own room to prove the treasure map wasn't with him, so now the two were on the same side. Now that the gold mine couldn't be found, but the fellow townsman had heard from the Indians about a gem mine, so the two decided to try to find it. On the other side, Alice had just married Silas and started a happy life. Every night, James would come to secretly look at them. Jealousy had made him unable to control himself. Even when the governor came to have his horseshoes replaced, James was too lazy to pay attention, because it was this governor who had refused his request to buy Alice. Now that his happy life was gone, James believed it was all because the governor hadn't agreed to marry Alice to him. Just as he landed a punch on the other's face, he was destined to bear severe consequences. Soon the town court sentenced James to death. No matter his dissatisfaction with the governor's original decision, anyone daring to attack the governor must pay with their life. The moment the noose was placed around his neck, James deeply regretted his impulsive act. Despite anyone pleading for mercy, the governor refused to spare him. As the execution was about to begin, officials suddenly noticed the rope might be too long. If this went on, James would die a painful death. Witnessing this cruel scene, Alice finally couldn't bear it. She begged the governor to spare James' life, arguing that without James, the townspeople's lives would be greatly inconvenienced. The governor saw the logic and hurriedly had James cut down. Thankfully, the rope was long enough to save his life. However, the governor still expected genuine repentance and submission from him. James had to comply to survive, but as he left, he whispered in Alice's ear, "I love you." This made Alice worry again. The newlyweds led a happy life, and Jocelyn would visit Alice from time to time. For this sister who was sold here together, they took care of each other as much as possible. But Alice didn't know that Jocelyn was deeply interested in the town's rumored gold mine. Since Henry, who had bought Alice earlier, died in a gunpowder explosion, everyone speculated the incident was related to the gold mine. From Alice, Jocelyn confirmed that Henry had indeed planned to take Silas to find the gold mine, but not knowing its location, he accidentally ignited gunpowder during arrest, ending the search. Now, who held the treasure map? After the previous governor's funeral, the new governor returned and took out a box containing the long-sought gold mine treasure map. Yet, due to his position, he had no chance to excavate it now. Just as all mysteries remained unsolved, the only cow plowing Alice's field was killed. She didn't know who was so heartless as to harm a livestock. The only suspect was the wealthy merchant, as the couple had indeed offended him before. Arriving there, Alice found the wealthy merchant whipping a slave and intervened to stop him. As the merchant was about to attack Alice, Silas rushed over and snatched the whip. Regarding their accusation, the wealthy merchant disdained killing their cow, so someone else must have done it. The second suspect was James, whom Alice thought had sabotaged their life out of spite for not winning her. That Alice could think of him as such a villain broke James' heart. Even after Alice quickly apologized, James wouldn't forgive her. Soon the matter reached the town court. Silas still believed the wealthy merchant had retaliated by killing their cow. Without needing to explain, the officials favored the merchant. Without evidence, Silas publicly accused a man of status, so the officials not only refused to help but also made Silas apologize to the merchant. This result was beyond the couple's expectations. Many would say, "What's the big deal about a dead cow?" In truth, for the first settlers in America, a cow's value was incredibly high. With vast fertile land, how much could be reclaimed by human labor alone without such livestock? Just as the couple decided to let it go, they suddenly saw James rowing upstream. When Silas asked where he was going, James said he was investigating his brother's death. This panicked Alice and Silas. Although his brother's death wasn't directly his fault, Silas had chosen to stand by and watch Henry perish in the fire to be with Alice. Though Silas wasn't worried about James finding evidence, revisiting the matter made him anxious. Taking advantage of the official's absence, Verity sneaked into his home, stole gentlemen's accessories, and planned to give them to her husband as a gift. Seeing these mysterious items, her husband immediately realized they were stolen. Wearing such accessories in public, if seen by officials, would lead to imprisonment at best, death at worst. He warned Verity to stop stealing, but would his words work? That night, their tavern was still open when a customer molested Verity. Though she rebuked him, another man noted the incident. When the tavern closed at midnight, the molesting customer accidentally pushed him, and the man's shotgun discharged. This terrified Verity. By the time they reached the town hospital, the man was dead. Soon the customer was jailed. Verity sought mercy for him, but officials insisted on waiting for the trial. After everyone left, an official secretly told the customer a way to survive. The next day in court, the man who had respected Verity suddenly changed his story, claiming the accident occurred because Verity had toyed with both men. Verity's husband knew he was lying, but he could do nothing about the public slander. However, Verity reasoned that if this saved his life, she would bear the slander. In truth, the official was behind it all. That night, he ordered the man and the patrol to riot at Verity's tavern, aiming to destabilize the town and overthrow the governor. He could then seize the position easily. Unfortunately, the governor was ill and powerless to stop the officials' actions. As townspeople, Verity and Alice could only watch the officials wreak havoc. That night, the man who had slandered Verity approached, apologizing for the day's actions and warning Verity to leave, hinting at impending danger. Before Verity could ask more, he left without a word. The next day, James returned from investigating Henry's death with terrible news for Alice. Henry was alive. After the Indians healed him, he vanished. Silas refused to believe James, for he had seen his brother blown to death with his own eyes. The wealthy merchant, understanding Silas' thoughts, feared Henry's return. Silas had not only taken his land but also married his fiancée. James urged Silas to find his brother, but Alice vehemently opposed. She feared Henry most. If he returned, her happy life would end. Silas hesitated, and after a quarrel with Alice, he left. Meanwhile, Verity told the governor about the patrol's planned riot and tried to dissuade the man, hoping to stop him as an elder sister. She found him helpless. Disobeying the official meant death. As the situation worsened, the governor, despite his illness, had to intervene. Rising from a soldier, he understood the patrolmen's desire to be warriors, promising them positions and uniforms. He won over the rebellious man. As the man was about to accept the terms, the official shot him from behind, covering their tracks. Though the rebellion was quelled, Verity grieved for the man's death. Just as the town found peace, Alice woke to discover Silas sneaking away to find Henry. She tried to stop him, but Silas was tortured by guilt for his inaction. He wondered if finding his brother was right or wrong. Shore Indians watched menacingly when Silas fell into the river. They rushed to capture him. Despite his pleas, they spared him and fetched the Indian once captured by the town. Silas had interpreted for him, forming a friendship. After Silas explained his mission, the Indian agreed to help him find Henry. Henry, after days of effort, discovered a silver mine. Though less valuable than gold, it was enough to make them rich. Excited, they worked furiously, planning to bring back the first batch. Eyeing each other secretly, both coveted the wealth and intended to monopolize it. They made the first shipment, vowing to keep the location secret. But would they honor their word? In town, Alice hadn't slept peacefully since learning Henry lived from James. With Silas gone, she felt unsafe. She asked James to make a dagger for self-defense, but he refused, fearing she might kill. This enraged Alice, who vowed never to speak to James again. Days later, James relented. So deep was his love that he agreed to any request, provided she didn't do something foolish. Alice promised to use the dagger only for defense. Meanwhile, Silas, led by his Indian friend, reached the tribe that had sheltered Henry, followed by Henry's returned fellow townsman. Unaware Henry had found silver and returned to town, the fellow townsman lied that Henry remained in the mountains. Silas decided to search the mountains. At a town bonfire party, Henry emerged from the darkness. His appearance shocked onlookers, and all eyes turned to him, silencing the lively gathering. Alice trembled at the man who had hurt her. This Henry was changed. The mine's secret would make him rich and a respected gentleman. Over a year had passed since news of Henry's death reached town. Yet here he was, scarred, clutching a package. Curious townspeople followed as he tossed the package and announced finding a silver mine to officials. The news stunned everyone as the first settlers. The wealth they discovered should rightfully belong to them, but officials opposed sharing, claiming as king-appointed settlers, wealth belonged to the crown. The official aimed to monopolize the mine, but townspeople refused. Despite legal threats, Henry decided to lead everyone in mining, offering equal shares to all commoners and officials. This won approval, and the three officials dared not object. Without an army, they risked their lives if they angered the crowd. Henry took silver ore samples to the doctor, the town's most learned man, for refining advice. Lacking smelting equipment, the doctor provided a crucible and directed them to James. Fearing Henry's return, Alice accused him of assaulting her before their marriage to officials. Normally, this would mean death, but now officials hesitated. Henry was protected by the town, and they wanted to curry favor for a bigger share. Alice left disappointed. James was the only one in town who could refine silver, but he hesitated not for lack of desire for wealth, but fear Henry would retaliate against Alice for marrying Silas. James would only start smelting if Henry promised to let bygones be bygones. Henry reluctantly agreed. Alice, unaware of James' help, prayed for Silas' return. Silas and the Indian reached the mountains, but the Indian revealed the guide had lied. Henry had returned to town. Panicked for Alice, Silas raced back, considering that she couldn't keep crashing at her friends' places. Alice grabbed her dagger and prepared to confront Henry once and for all. As Henry washed by the river, he saw Alice's reflection. He felt guilty for the past and told her to strike if she wished. But Alice, never having killed, couldn't bring herself to do it and spared him. Silas returned, rushed to find Henry, and begged forgiveness for watching him die. Henry didn't hate Alice for remarrying, but he couldn't forgive Silas for his inaction. Back home, Alice scolded Silas for leaving her. He apologized, but she couldn't forgive easily after days of fear. After venting, she left Silas outside and entered their room. A girl accidentally knocked over a candle, igniting hay. Instead of fetching water, she tried to blow it out. As the fire grew, she found the door locked, hearing cries for help. Alice tried to open the door but failed. Henry, passing by, slammed the door down. Thick smoke alerted the town. When Henry rushed in to save the girl, his scarred face terrified her. He carried her out but was blocked by a falling beam. Silas dashed in to rescue Henry, horrifying Alice, but he succeeded. Strangely, Henry didn't thank him, recalling Silas' previous inaction. After the fire, Henry became a hero, not just for the rescue but for discovering a silver mine. If confirmed, the town would prosper. Tensions rose as the test began. Henry, desperate to rise after 8 years of slavery, and townspeople pinned hopes on him. The result, not silver, but a similar metal. Skeptics mocked, and Henry fell into despair. Silas tried to console him but was brutally attacked. Henry drew a dagger, but James intervened. The town's dream of wealth shattered, and Henry lay motionless in the weeds. New settlers arrived, including bought women and slaves. After days in the weeds, Silas and their brother tried to take Henry home, but Alice opposed. Haunted by his past assault, Silas overruled her. Determined to care for his brother, Henry wandered like a zombie. Silas urged him to farm, but Henry ignored him. Alice knew it was the town's mockery, not the metal, that broke him. As the couple discussed helping Henry, the wealthy merchant arrived. Once their master, he resented their independence and schemed to drive down Silas' crop prices. Their hope for harvest now faced losses, and Silas was powerless until the governor announced a decree: select farmer representatives as council members to ensure fair town governance. This delighted residents. After the meeting, James told Alice he would stop pursuing her and wished her happiness with Silas. He had been obsessed with the first woman he'd seen in years, but now planned to buy a wife with his earnings. Alice supported him, and their feud ended, with the wealthy merchant threatening their livelihood. Alice urged Silas to unite with other farmers, but Silas spoke carelessly, and the merchant saw him. The next day, the merchant arrived menacingly. Alice ran to Henry if he didn't help. No one would. The past was past. They should live as a family. Besides, Alice was pregnant. Henry, hearing this, looked at Alice. As the merchant attacked Silas, Henry emerged and stopped him. He still held influence in town. The merchant relented, and with Henry's help, Silas joined the farmer union, fixing prices to foil the merchant's plot. A bountiful harvest followed, and Henry revived. After helping Silas, he worked his own land. Alice gave birth underwater, a painless and healthy delivery. Friends joked she had a fish baby, and she thanked the women who helped. Silas, trading with Indians, didn't know he'd become a father until Verity told him. He returned home, overjoyed, holding his son under the moon, the first child born in the town. A significant milestone. Unbeknownst to them, Indians watched. The next day, Alice fell asleep while minding the baby. Henry picked the child up without permission, alarming Alice. Despite his efforts making a crib, she distrusted him. The governor's wife visited, hoping the child would be named after the king, but Alice deferred. At the baptism, they named the child after Silas. Disappointing the governor but satisfying reason, the town celebrated with song and revelry. Moved, Henry told Silas he planned to buy a wife to build a future. That night, Silas strolled with the baby when Indians appeared, again asking for intelligence. If it was because of the favor from back then, he hoped to make up for it in another way. But how could the Indians agree? Just then, Alice also heard the commotion outside. When she stepped out, she saw only Silas talking in the shadows. She could have sworn there was another man, but Silas denied it. Her husband's odd behavior aroused Alice's suspicion. It turned out Alice had inadvertently discovered Silas was growing close to the Indians. Coupled with his early morning disappearance, Alice suspected he might have become a town traitor. As she worried, she overheard the governor and Jocelyn discussing how to deal with traitors. Sending her into a panic, she begged James not to reveal the matter, fearing her husband would be sentenced to death. James promised to keep it secret. In truth, Alice didn't know Silas hadn't betrayed town secrets to the Indians. Though he owed them a favor, he refused to repay it that way. He didn't want to be a traitor nor offend his Indian friend, but there was no perfect solution. If Silas wouldn't help, he'd become the Indians' enemy. Despite the threat, Silas didn't take it to heart. Back home, Alice pressed him about where he'd been. Silas tried to lie but was quickly exposed by Alice. Facing his wife's questions, Silas refused to reveal the truth. Just then, Henry arrived, interrupting their argument. Soon, the brothers traveled to Indian territory. This trade wasn't as easy as before after all. Silas had refused their request, and Henry was unaware. Meanwhile, Verity and her husband were plotting a deal with sailors. Since sailors could easily steal ship cargo, Verity could buy it at a fraction of the cost, but the risk was huge. Caught, they'd be executed on the spot. Still, they decided to make the deal for greater profit. As the trade neared, Silas and Henry passed by. They knew the sailor's shady business and suspected it might relate to Jocelyn's husband's death. Anyone who witnessed the sailor's deals had been killed. Thus, the brothers decided to apprehend them. They never expected Verity to be there. As Henry and Silas closed in, a sailor grabbed Verity as a hostage. He didn't see Silas behind him with a single strike. Silas rescued Verity. Enraged, Silas wounded the sailor but wouldn't let him go. Henry had to intervene to stop him. Soon the sailor was taken back to town. To everyone's surprise, the sailor was deaf and mute, leaving officials unable to question him. Eventually, he was publicly executed per the law. An official then seized Verity, demanding why she'd been in the woods. Verity couldn't admit the trade, so she lied about fetching water. Silas lied to protect her, buying Verity temporary freedom from suspicion. That night, the couple regretted their decision. They'd used all savings to buy the cargo, only to be caught by Silas and Henry. Their luck had truly run out. After falling asleep in the wild, Alice woke to find her child missing. Assuming Silas had taken the baby, she rushed home only to find he hadn't seen the child either. Alice recalled the previous scene. She'd seen Indians in the woods, who'd threatened to collect a debt from her husband. The child's abduction must be their doing. Silas didn't doubt his wife. He and Henry grabbed their muskets, heading to Indian territory to retrieve the child. After they left, Alice's two girlfriends came to stay with her. No one could fathom why the Indians had stolen the baby. Though Alice knew the truth about the Indians pressuring Silas to betray the town, she dared not speak up. Such a revelation would mean death under town law. Just then, Jocelyn spotted an Indian nearby and called Alice out. As they approached to demand the child, the third brother began preparing a musket in the house. Alice asked why they'd stolen her child, but the Indian denied it. Before he could explain, the third brother emerged with his gun. Thankfully, the Indian fled in time, saving his life, but Alice couldn't tell if he was telling the truth. To find her child, Alice went to the governor's farm. A slave there, constantly complaining about missing her own child, became a suspect, but the slave swore she hadn't taken Alice's baby. Looking into her sincere eyes, Alice believed her. However, if the governor learned of this, he'd seize the chance to confront the Indians. By then, Silas and Henry had reached Indian territory. From the perimeter, they heard a baby's cry and planned to sneak in at night to rescue the child. But in town, the governor was mustering militiamen, intending to use the opportunity to attack the Indians. After the militia departed, the brothers sneaked into the camp under cover of night. Hearing the baby's cries, they were sure it was their son, but as they prepared to rush in, a woman emerged holding a baby. They'd mistaken the cries. It wasn't their son. At dawn, the governor and his men arrived, coinciding with the brothers. Seeing the large force, the brothers realized the governor was using the child's abduction as a pretext to attack the Indians. Though they didn't want politics involved, the situation was now beyond their control. As they approached Indian territory, the Indians charged into their camp first, putting everyone on high alert. The governor knew the chief had spotted them, so he abandoned subterfuge and marched openly to negotiate. Though tensions flared, the chief denied stealing the child, leaving the governor no excuse to attack. He could only issue threats before leaving. Alice waited anxiously by the river, consumed by regret and guilt. When she saw Silas return empty-handed, Alice broke down. She searched blindly for Silas, eager to comfort him, but her self-blame left her unsure of how to face her husband. In the Indian camp, the man who befriended Silas learned from the chief that they had indeed stolen Silas' child. Not wanting this to damage their relationship, he devised a compromise: return the child and marry his sister to Henry. This intermarriage would allow the Indians to learn about town policies through the sister. The chief approved. The man then rode alone to where the child was hidden. He couldn't let the town know they'd stolen the baby, so he needed a plan to return the child secretly. Shortly after, a woman walking by the river heard a baby's cry and ran to get Alice. Hearing the call, Alice raced to the riverbank. The child was in a small boat. Silas dashed in, while the Indians watched from a distance. After this ordeal, Henry had good fortune. The Indians decided to give him a wife and held a simple wedding ceremony in the tribe. When Henry returned to town with his bride, opinions varied. Some feared diluted blood, Others envied his luck. In the governor's eyes, Henry's wife was a pawn against the Indians. As Henry enjoyed his newlywed life, the governor visited with men. He wanted Henry to bribe his wife's brother for Indian intelligence, but Henry thought the governor underestimated them. They wouldn't betray their tribe. Still, the governor urged him to try. Shortly after the Indian woman arrived, she took charge of assigning tasks, even dictating to Alice, whom she considered her sister-in-law. She even demanded cooking follow their customs. When Alice saw freshly cut onions thrown out, she couldn't understand why, but received no explanation. Elsewhere, Henry hunted with his brother-in-law's tribe, only to be mocked about his sex life. Furious at the unwarranted virile man label, he felt insulted and decided to follow the governor's earlier advice to sow discord among the Indians. This was seen by his brother Silas. Soon, the governor sent the Indians numerous gifts: tables, chairs, pots, and pans, all coveted by the Indians. The governor allowed them to pay later, but the chief didn't realize this was a plot to drown them in debt. After the trade, Silas secretly told Henry's brother-in-law about the governor's scheme. His kind nature couldn't bear to see this happen. To prevent conflict, the Indians visited town soon after. The chief sent a dozen strong young men to work for a year, repaying the governor's gifts. Realizing his plot was foiled, the governor first suspected a traitor in town, but without evidence, he was powerless. To find the traitor, the governor sent Jocelyn to the doctor's home at night to pry information. He suspected the doctor. A widow visiting a man's room at night would raise suspicions about their relationship. A man, ignoring stares, wore a dress in public and confessed love to another man. The governor, embarrassed, ordered him to change, but the man claimed to be a real woman. To verify, the governor sent the doctor to examine him, with Alice present at the man's request for credibility. In the room, they watched in shock as the man undressed. He was a hermaphrodite, possessing both male and female reproductive organs. The doctor publicly announced this, leaving the governor speechless and forced to accept his cross-dressing. The official who brought Simeon didn't know he was a hermaphrodite. He'd hoped to get rich through Simeon's alchemy, but the official's friend thought it impossible if alchemy could turn base metal to gold. Why would Simeon work for others? The official, obsessed, believed the undeveloped Americas held rich resources for alchemy, so they went to the doctors, where Simeon used his equipment for alchemy. With the official's backing, Simeon got all he needed. He then approached James, demanding large sums and making him an assistant. After securing basics, the official took Simeon to the governor, who believed in alchemy and vowed to support them. Another official thought it fantasy and tried to dissuade the governor, but the governor wouldn't give up the chance to get rich. Failing to stop them, this official targeted Simeon, suspecting him of being gay based on his attire. He publicly announced new royal laws, threatening the gallows for anyone crossing the divide. Simeon couldn't help laughing, and his friend pulled him away. Regardless of alchemy's validity, the official was determined to try and told his friend to stay out of it. One thing remained for alchemy: cinnabar, only found among the Indians. They had to ask Henry and Silas, the town's only Indian traders. But after Henry's previous conflict with his brother-in-law, Silas had to handle the negotiation. The brothers took a food basin to the Indian tribe's edge. Henry, having nearly harmed them before, couldn't approach, so Silas traded for cinnabar. Even as they left, distrust lingered, frustrating Henry. Simeon, eager to start alchemy, finally confessed he'd come with the official because he loved him. Predictably, the official dared not accept his love discovery would cost his position in life. Simeon tried to undress to show his female attributes, but the official stopped him, fearing mistakes. Rejected, Simeon persisted. That night, they dined together, and his act of pouring the official a drink was seen, making any explanation unbelievable. The next day, Henry's brothers brought cinnabar. Knowing the official needed it for alchemy, they demanded a horse in exchange, far more than cinnabar's worth. But the official agreed for wealth. The brothers had made a lucrative deal. With all materials ready, Simeon gathered helpers and began alchemy. Soon, a yellow liquid was produced. No one believed it could turn to gold, and the governor felt deceived. Undeterred, Simeon drank the liquid and took Jocelyn to witness miracles. Dressed as a woman, Simeon paraded through town, aiming to convince everyone the liquid could turn men into women so he could be with the official. Though many believed he was a hermaphrodite, the doctor knew the liquid wasn't the cause. Simeon had always been one. James also dismissed alchemy if it worked. Gold wouldn't be valuable. Only the official felt deeply defeated. Though he had Simeon's love, his dream of wealth was shattered, so he told Simeon to leave. Henry's brothers received a letter. Their crops shipped home had been hijacked at sea. while the governor's goods remained intact. Everyone suspected the governor of embezzling their hard-earned money. As the situation escalated, the governor lied that the Spanish were coming to seize their land, temporarily pacifying the crowd. Instead of demanding repayment, they orderly began organizing town defenses. For the greater good, Henry's brothers dropped their grievances but demanded answers after the crisis. With Spanish attacks feared, townspeople lived in fear, forming militias to patrol at night. 2 guards in the dark saw a shadow flash by, freezing them in place. A bird's cry only heightened their terror. Alice's family dared not leave town, crowding with others. When she went to the outhouse, she found countless corpse worms. At Jocelyn's, a maid heard noises at night and saw her dead master's body alive outside the window. Jocelyn woke to find the ring she'd given her husband beside her. The next day, she asked the doctor to confirm she'd given the ring to him, but the box holding it was full of corpse worms. Everyone believed a ghost was at work. Night patrolmen saw Jocelyn's dead lover's ghost. Alice thought the wronged clerk had unfulfilled wishes, returning for Jocelyn. To prevent the body from leaving the grave, Alice used a folk method, nailing the graveyard. The next night, the same guards saw the graveyard nails pulled out. Alice, unable to sleep, checked the graveyard during a thunderstorm, terrifying everyone. James realized if the ghost existed, it would go for Jocelyn, so they rushed to her house. Jocelyn was terrified as objects in her room broke inexplicably. As the maid and she panicked, James burst in, and Jocelyn fled into his arms. The abnormalities stopped. After the previous night's events, townspeople wanted to flee, but the governor calmed them. Before solving the ghost mystery, the governor visited the imprisoned wealthy merchant. He believed the merchant was behind Henry's lost cargo and the clerk's murder. They devised a plan. Touch the clerk's body. If the killer did, it would bleed. Witnessed by all, the merchant was first to touch the body. No blood. Cleared of suspicion, the merchant accused Jocelyn, forcing her to touch the body. As Jocelyn, innocent, reached out, cannon fire sounded. Militiamen had sighted a Spanish merchant ship. The governor, seeing they weren't attacking, called a halt. Back in the room, Jocelyn touched the body with no blood. To convict the merchant, she whispered to the governor, fetched an item, and asked the merchant to touch the body again. As he did, Jocelyn moved the item, and the merchant's nose bled. Caught in the act, he was branded the clerk's killer and the mastermind behind Henry's lost cargo. With a scapegoat, the governor ordered the merchant's punishment. Having killed the merchant earlier, they now seized his land. To make the governor compromise, Jocelyn approached another official, offering a heavy reward for information. She learned the merchant's land deal was illegal. Exposing this would trouble the governor in the capital. During negotiations, Jocelyn revealed the secret. To avoid scandal, the governor begrudgingly gave Jocelyn the land. Announcing this to the town, both the official who looked down on Jocelyn and the governor felt embarrassed. The incident became a town joke. To gain more land and teach Jocelyn a lesson, the governor and others plotted to burn her farm and blame the Indians. This would strike a blow against the woman and justify war with the Indians for more land. Their plan was overheard by a maid, who told Alice while washing clothes. Kind-hearted Alice, unwilling to see Indians framed, asked Silas to warn them, but Silas refused, not wanting to be a traitor. Helpless, Alice went to the Indian tribe alone, telling Henry's brother-in-law the news. She didn't hide this from Silas, who, seeing the deed done, didn't blame her, hoping things wouldn't worsen. Jocelyn, after inspiring her workers, had her first quarterly harvest. Thinking she'd finally established herself, her farm was set ablaze that night by the governor's men. The fire consumed the farm, and Jocelyn could only watch it burn. The next day, after the fire, Indian arrows were found, and the doctor implicated Silas. With Silas accused of aiding Indian arson, the brothers had no choice but to flee. Officials surrounded Silas' home, but Henry stood with his brother, temporarily fending them off. Stalemated, Alice told Silas to escape to the Indians for safety. After Silas left, Henry was shot, but the governor didn't punish him, blaming Silas instead. Henry took Alice to the Indian tribe. Seeing her husband assimilated, Alice felt conflicted. She wanted to stay with Silas but worried about their child's future in such an environment. Silas didn't want her to stay, fearing he'd never return to town. Meanwhile, the governor had mustered the militia. This time, they would wage war under the pretext of capturing traitors and seize more land from the Indians. I'm a movie enthusiast. Please subscribe to my channel.